Son, turn your ears to my words. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The heart is the water well from which every feat of man springs forth. Everything that a man does, he has to draw out from his heart. Whatever is concealed at the bottom of that uncharted well is what flows out into the world through word and deed. And that's why our world is broken. It is a place that's governed by disoriented individuals that can't grasp themselves, much less the things around them. They can't tell their right hand from their left. Men who have no clue how to establish peace and solidarity in their lives and don't even understand what life is. Now, I'm including myself in this, just as Job did. Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. I am blameless, yet I do not know myself. The truth is, we are all ignorant beyond measure. The depth of man's heart is too dark and deep for us to even know it thoroughly. Only the Creator has perfect knowledge. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. That is why his divine guidelines are important. However, even these written codes can be mishandled when given to men. Now, in our last video, Christ, the author of these timeless laws, laid it all out plainly. The Jewish impression of God's laws was to merely perform them outwardly, but ignoring the inward application. This is the equivalent of slapping a band-aid on a broken leg. In this sermon, Jesus challenges their perspective by showing them that the issues run deeper than just externals. He uses the example of thou shalt not murder. He said if you were to merely wish another's harm, that would be the equivalent of murder. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty steep. Guilt is laid upon all at this point, and the box of band-aids ain't gonna help. But if they still weren't convinced, he goes on to list even more laws that were commonly misunderstood. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. Why doesn't Jesus want men making promises? Because the Almighty God is the great unchanging promise keeper, and he never lies. When an unholy being swears to a holy God, that just goes to show his ignorance. He doesn't understand holiness, and he doesn't understand his own shortcomings. Is a man really able to make promises and guarantee them all just like God? Well, no, and that's the point. To do so would be presumptuous and arrogant. Our ever-changing circumstances that are out of our control would prove us to be powerless, liars, and unable to keep our promises. It would be wiser to keep trotting the path of humility here. The people also picked up a bad habit of swearing by something of greater virtue. By doing this, irreverent men are borrowing credibility from something else to backfill their own dishonesty, using promises as a cheap cover for deceit. But when a God-fearing man speaks, he doesn't need the swears and promises, because he's already dedicated himself to speaking truth, period. Ironically, whenever you have swearing and promises involved, it's usually the sign of a liar. And that's why they have to borrow the credibility in the first place, because they have cried wolf too many times. People like this don't revere the God of truth. They treat the gravity of God lightly. Walk prudently when you go to the house of God, and draw near to hear rather than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they do evil. Do not be rash with your mouth, And let not your heart utter anything hastily before God, for God is in heaven and you on earth. Therefore let your words be few. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. Do not let your mouth cause your flesh to sin, for in many words there is vanity, but fear God. If we're making oaths to God, what we're ultimately doing is tacking on extra obligations to the law, making it harder to follow and easier to sin. The fear of God's justice just isn't there. They underestimate him by saying, not only will I keep your law, I'll go above and beyond it. This indicates a staggering amount of pride in the heart. They bring God down a ton of notches, and then they raise themselves up to his level as if he were a sinful man, just like them. If a person believes that he can steadfastly keep every promise that he makes, he is exalting himself to equality with the infinite promise keeper, which is just defying reality. So just to remind you, but I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one. In other words, it doesn't really matter what you swear by, because God owns all things. So if you decide to swear on your mother's grave, or if you decide to swear on a paperclip, it's all the same to God. God owns your mother's grave, and he owns the paperclip. He is ever present, and God expects men to always speak truth, knowing that we speak in his hearing at all times. The wise will muzzle their mouths because they understand their own impulsive blunders. So stop before you rattle off and consider your speech carefully. Humility will eliminate the need for swears and promises and gives room for God's grace. Jesus continues, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person." This one in particular was quoted from Deuteronomy chapter 19. And it was an instruction for the judges and priests of Israel, not individuals in society. By this saying, God granted law enforcement capabilities to the governing bodies to avenge evil as an example of God's justice toward any who take up rebellion. It was never intended to be applied within individual relationships, which is how it was being taught. So when it comes to who we personally come in contact with, we should refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. The Lord is our avenger, not us. The desire of a sinner to repay another sinner, evil for evil, only shows that each contender is pulling from the exact same tainted well. It wouldn't right the wrong, it would only further the divide. We shouldn't ever usurp God's position as avenger, because that is the supreme sin. It's not trusting him. Human wrath merely bulges their own confidence in themselves to deliver a righteous judgment in God's place. It boils down to impatience with God, where his justice is completely forgotten or greatly minimized. This prideful impulse turns our feet away from God. So Christ gave us our highest example. The blameless do not retaliate. Trust the Lord in those difficult times. He says, "But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone wants to sue you or take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away." Shining this type of love will grab anybody's attention because it's not a typical behavior that the world sees as love. They preach a me-first type of love. This is a holy love, a godly love. Since the beginning of time, God has always loved men in this way, by keeping them fed, clothed, sheltered, watered, and much more. He continually gives, even to the men who gnash their teeth at the sound of his name. He is still long-suffering and compassionate, even to his adversaries. Then we look at the ministry of Christ, where he stepped off his heavenly throne and came down and put on flesh, humbly lived out love in a body, giving and giving, bearing all men's sicknesses and the weight of all men's sins, even Israel's oppressors. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Tax collectors were seen as greedy traitors to the people of Israel, saddling up to Rome for monetary gain. Yet Jesus was saying the dignified people were no different than tax collectors. They loved in the exact same ways. Both were enslaved to a shallow love, where they would only give love for love, but hate for hate. Loving only if a benefit is involved. Surface level love is not love at all. A true love is going to run deep to every last soul, regardless of who they are. This type of love is found at the right hand of the Father. And as God's children, we mirror Christ, for he is love. Be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount series. In our next video, we're going to be heading into chapter 6. So if you liked the video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment so that you can keep up with our content and your brothers and sisters in Christ. God bless.